Today, let's talk about the discipline of fasting. Traditionally, fasting is going without food for some period of time. It's an expected, normal part of Christianity, although most of us in the West don't talk too much about it. And when Jesus spoke to his disciples, he talked about when you fast, not if you fast. I like to think of the discipline of fasting as similar to cleaning house or cleaning out the house or cleaning out the closet. It's taking things out and making space and making room for other things and for better things. Some of the hopes behind fasting are that it would just help expose addictions or things that have a hold on us or strongholds. Obviously, food is necessary, but I'm thinking things like you can also fast from TV, screen time, video games, other things that tend to crowd into our life. The discipline of fasting is about pushing them out, making room, and then filling it back up with better things and experiencing what happens when we do that. Now, the physical aspect of fasting from food, helps us to understand the spiritual aspect, right? That when animals or people are sick, they tend to fast, and it lets your body focus on healing rather than digestion. And likewise, in the spirit, the same thing happens when we stop focusing on our eating and our daily mundane task of preparing and eating food. It leaves our spirit time for prayer, for communing with God, for reading the scriptures. It just pushes away and creates space for other things. As well as I think the physical benefit is of some benefit or is of some use, that when our body slows down, it has a chance to purge. That when I fast for food for a length of time, I notice even my emotions start purging and coming out. I feel like a crybaby in the weakness that comes from fasting. Now, there is, of course, resistance and opposition to fasting. Like, my body doesn't like to fast. It likes food. It doesn't like the pain of sacrifice. It doesn't like discomfort. It doesn't like hunger, right? So my body kicks back and resists and says, no, stop fasting, eat now. Another obstacle is my flesh is not my ally, right? My flesh is my enemy. It wants to indulge. It wants to satisfy its impulses, satisfy its desires. That's why fasting is kind of like a muscle or an exercise. It's the no muscle that says I will resist those impulses and I will get stronger at it. The other resistance or place where I think we can go astray in fasting is where we think of fasting not as purifying ourselves, not as making room, but as manipulating God, almost like a child who holds his breath until daddy gives me what I want. Trying to manipulate God in any way, with fasting especially, always ends up going very badly in my experience. So I think it's one of the obstacles is to think of it as a tool to manipulate God. Some of the words that I would associate with fasting would be yielding, listening, focusing, harmonizing, trying to just chill my body out, make some space, make some room, fill it with good things and experience. So let's just talk a little bit about how we would do that. All right, one way I think is to incorporate regular weekly fasting in, like to say, okay, there's a day of the week when I wake up, I'm not going to eat breakfast, I'm not going to eat lunch, may or may not eat dinner. Depending on your comfort level, we're not trying to torture ourselves here. We're just trying to make room. We're trying to create an experience of leaving some space for God to fill up. So a normal fast, just a regular time to say maybe breakfast to dinner or breakfast to breakfast, just a 24-hour fast, maybe a 36-hour fast, someplace where during that day you're just abstaining from food. Likewise, it could be screen times, it could be video games, it could be any other thing that you want to fast from. But traditionally, food is the place that we go to first. And then there's extended fasting. I mean, I know people who have fasted for much longer than myself. I can't say I'm fantastic at it. My fasting muscle isn't beefy, but to go for 1, 2, 3, I think the 7 is the most I've ever gone in terms of days without food. But trying to stretch it, trying to push it, trying to have that experience of a longer fast. Again, a lot of times the benefit isn't in the fasting itself. It actually comes afterwards, once the body and the mind and the soul have had time to purge and clean out and clear. But during it, I find it pretty hard, that it's difficult. But then afterwards, like all of this fruit of clarity of mind, of new experiences with the Lord start to come in, and it make the discipline of fasting well worth the reward and the benefit that comes afterwards. A lot of the benefit comes after the fast, but some of it happens during the fast, right? That idea of my mind and my emotions and my body lining up, that naturally when I'm upset or angry or hurt or sad, I tend not to eat as much. And so to embrace a fast in those times lines up the body, lines up the soul and the emotions. I find that it actually helps me in my time of prayer. It helps me pour out the thoughts of my heart. And like I said, the purification process also stirs those emotions to the surface. So I find that during fasting is some of the rawest, most emotional prayers that I ever lift up to the Lord. Now, I really don't have as much to say about fasting as I do about some of the other disciplines. It's really simple. It's not about doing things, it's about not doing things. And then I guess maybe even filling that space with some of the other disciplines, the prayer and the Bible reading, things like that. Part of fasting, I think we need to be aware that there are concessions that can be made. Again, this isn't torture. This isn't self-affliction. This is seeking joy. This is seeking more of the Lord. This is seeking a benefit. It's working out. So I would also include, like I said, fasting primarily consists of foregoing food, but it could be technology, screens, TV, any routine that may have a hold on your life, anything that you can push aside to make more room from the Lord. I mean, I know people who go to quiet places just to fast from people and social interaction to find time with the Lord. Again, the main idea, making space and diverting energy. We're not spending the energy on digestion and food, we're spending it on spiritual exercise. We're not wasting our time and mind and thoughts on books and newspapers and media. We're, again, taking them to the Lord. Partial fasts, right? Modifying it any way, doing like a juice fast or something along those lines. I think there's on the scale of good, better, best. And remember, it's exercise. It's not a law. Do what you can. Enjoy what you can. Don't turn it into a torturous ordeal of self-righteousness. To be honest, there's times when I will even allow coffee to stay in my fast because I don't want that caffeine withdrawal headache. I know that it would be good for me to purify that out and get rid of that caffeine addiction, but maybe that's just not the right time, and maybe that's just not fitting with the right circumstances. There just needs to be freedom to make allowances in those experiments. It's about trying to have new high water marks, trying to draw closer to the Lord and having a high water experience that you don't forget, that you can come back to. Nobody lives on the mountaintop, right? So we tend to settle back down to our normal, but then fasting is like climbing the mountain. It's like trying to rise up, see new things, have greater experiences in the Lord, taste it, see it, experience it. And then we know that we're inevitably going to come back down the mountain. But each and every time, trying for a new high water mark, a new high experience, it increases our hope, it increases our testimony, it increases what we know and can testify of the Lord. I just want to read one other piece here from Matthew chapter 16 about fasting. And it's the idea that when we do our fasting, we want to make sure that we're not afflicting other people. And Jesus says to his disciples, when you fast, don't look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, and that their fasting might be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting might not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who is in secret will reward you. And so that's the idea. We are pursuing the reward to be found in Christ. It's a personal communion with Christ. It's not something that, oh, I'm not eating this today, and you're grumpy and you're mean towards other people, which is really easy to do, right? When we're fasting, we tend to be a little bit more edgy. Our emotions tend to be a little bit more on our sleeve, and Jesus is exhorting us to say, hey, be joyful, don't push yourself. This is not torture. Outwardly, you want to make sure that you can maintain a good testimony. Inwardly, we're seeking the Lord and his reward. All right, that's all I've got for fasting. I hope that you find a way to incorporate some elements of that in your life. It is about making room for the Lord. It is about trying to chase him a little harder, a little higher, making a new high watermark, having new experiences of the Lord. It's a joy. It's a pursuit. It's done in hope. It's done with expectation, not in, self-abasement and beating yourself and trying to force yourself to do something uncomfortable as if there's something spiritual in that. It's the hope that makes us be willing to pay the price, right? It's the joy that's set before us that makes us look to the cost. Thanks for watching. I will see you next video.